It's good to be able to join you again today as we open up another portion of God's Word. In Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6, we find these words: "Let your conduct be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, The Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me?" In these few verses, we really find a contrast between covetousness and contentment. Now, covetousness is a strong desire for material things. And of course, it is strongly condemned in the Bible. Paul said in Colossians 3, verse 5, that it is really nothing more than idolatry. Covetousness, our strong desire for material things, is nothing more than idolatry. But then in contrast to that is contentment. So those are opposites. You cannot have one without the other. If we are content, then we will not be covetousness. And if we are covetous about material things, you'll never be content, because you'll never have enough. Materialism creates anxiety. You see, greed can never make a person happy. And I'm sure all of us, if we would be thought about it, we would want to be content. Contentment is an important virtue for everyone, especially for Christians to develop. But what is contentment? And what is the key to being content? Well, first of all, the word content, English word content, means to desire no more than what one has. The Greek word means to be satisfied. So then contentment is basically being satisfied with what you have. Godliness with contentment is great gain, according to what Paul said in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 6. Godliness, which is godly living expressed in devotion to God, is of great value only when accompanied with contentment. And so all of us should try to develop the attitude of contentment. But this contentment is not something that comes natural. For instance, Paul wrote in Philippians 4, verses 11 and 12, "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need." Now notice in this first part of this verse, Paul said, I have learned to be content. The virtue of contentment then is not something that comes natural. It's a process that has to be learned. And Paul said he had learned that. And he had learned to the extent that no matter we had plenty or was hungry, he could still be content. Well, how then does one develop the idea of contentment? What is the key to contentment? Well, there's 3 or 4 things we want to mention in regard to that in our lesson today. The first key is trusting in God's providential care. As we've already looked at in Ephesians 13 and verse 6, it said, "The Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me?" Here the idea is that we trust in God, then we can be content because we can rest assured that God will take care of us. Paul wrote in Philippians 4 verse 13, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And there in that context, he's talking about the idea of contentment. Contentment then is not dependent upon external circumstances, but having Christ within us. But being content means more than just being satisfied, for it includes a dependence upon God. God has promised to never leave nor forsake us. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus told us not to worry, because he took care of the birds and the flowers, and we're of much greater value than the birds and the flowers. So if God would care for the birds and the flowers of the field, then certainly God will providential care for us. But the key to receiving this care is to put God first in our lives. Matthew 6 and verse 33, Jesus says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." Notice we must put God first. Contentment then comes when we trust God and we really put God first in our lives and we trust him enough that he will provide us. Why should we be anxious about our financial support when we believe that God cares for us? And God certainly is powerful enough to take care of us. So therefore, if we really trust in God, there's no reason for us to be anxious about the various things that might come our way in this life. We must trust in God's providential care. The second key to being contentment is knowing you cannot take anything with you. As Paul discussed contentment, he pointed out certain truths. One of the truths he pointed out is found in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 7. "For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out." Now, we all know that we brought nothing into this world, and I think we equally know that we can carry nothing out. In other words, everything you have from a monetary or a physical standpoint is going to be left behind when we die. And we are going to die one day. We all know that for sure. And therefore, whatever you have is going to be left behind. So then why should we become anxious or worried about various things when they are at best only temporary? They will also wear out, be stolen, be left behind, or something else. You see, contentment then comes from knowing that material things are only temporary. We must live our lives knowing that the things of this world, they're only temporary. They're only for our use while we're here. So there's really not much use to be storing up vast quantities of it because, after all, like I said, we're going to leave it all behind. We must be content. Realize that the things here are only temporary. The third key to contentment then is realizing what is truly essential for life. We like to think, or many people think, that the things of this world are truly essential for life. And yes, to some extent they are. We need some food and shelter and clothing and such things at that. But really, that is the only truly essential things that we have. Paul wrote in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 8, "Having food and clothing, with these we shall be content." Notice what the truly essential. Paul said the truly essential things of life are not a great abundance of things, but really only two things: food and clothing. Outside of that, that's really all we have to have. That is the truly essential things. So contentment comes in by realizing what is truly essential and what else is really, well, you might say, luxury. When we start realizing what is truly essential, then we'll realize just how blessed we really are. Because I'm sure most all of us have much more than just clothing and food. Now, we might not have everything we want. Of course, you'll never have everything you want. There's always going to be something more out there that you can want. But we need to realize what is truly essential. And the things that we want, the things that might satisfy our lust and desires, they are not essential for life. So we can be content when we begin to realize what is truly essential. Then another key is to understand that material things do not satisfy. Material things cannot really satisfy us. You remember Solomon. Solomon was probably one of the richest men the world has ever seen. He was a king of Israel at the time when it was at the height of its glory and honor. And Solomon observed the inadequacy of material things in Ecclesiastes 5 and verse 10 when he wrote, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity." You see, he realized that material things cannot satisfy. It doesn't matter how much silver or gold you have, you will never have enough. You'll always want just a little bit more. You'll want just something else. Contentment then comes from understanding that material things will never provide lasting satisfaction. And so once you realize this, then we'll stop trying to seek after material things so much, because you realize they're never going to bring satisfaction anyway. You'll never be content by seeking after material things. And then the final key to contentment is realize that true contentment is a gift from God. This also is another observation that Solomon made, this time in Ecclesiastes 3, verses 11 and 12. He said, I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. You see, Solomon realized that the ability to enjoy as one labors is really a gift from God. There is some satisfaction that we can have by enjoying the things of our labor. There's nothing wrong with laboring and getting the things of this world, as long as we're not just seeking after, but we enjoy the fruit of our labor. And that is a gift from God. God only has the ability to provide lasting satisfaction. Psalm 107, verses 8 and 9, the psalmist wrote, Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. For he satisfies the longing soul and fills the hungry soul with goodness. Notice the psalmist again echoes what Solomon said when he said that God gives and satisfies the longing soul, and he fills the hungry soul with goodness. You see, only God can really bring satisfaction. True contentment then is a gift from God, but it comes when we begin to really put God first. I'm sure all of you again would like to be content. All men want to be content in this life. Well, we have looked at what contentment is, and we have seen what the key to contentment is. First of all, realizing that trusting in God's providential care. The second is knowing you can't take anything with you, so why seek after so much? And then we need to realize what is truly essential and understand that material things do not satisfy. Once you realize that, then you can realize true contentment. And God will give you the true contentment if we really start making God first in our life. Where is your priorities? Is God your number one priority? You see, by making God our number one priority, then contentment comes as kind of a byproduct of that. True contentment and happiness comes not from seeking after happiness, but from seeking the will of God and putting God first in our lives. And once you do that, then you realize what true contentment and happiness is. That should be our primary focus. Where is God in your life? If God is not number one in your life, I pray that you will do that today. Begin today to really put God first in our lives. Thank you for your attention today, and we hope to join you again another time. Thank you.